From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. And coming up today from the Livestock Marketing Information Center, Katelyn McCullock with this week's cattle market segment. She'll, of course, break down the numbers from that USDA cattle inventory report released on Friday, what those say about nationwide herd contraction. Then K-State's Brad White and Bob Weaber will discuss several things pertaining to the breed composition of the commercial cow-calf herd and how that relates to herd genetic improvement. And on this week's 4-H segment, further ahead, then, K-State's Shane Potter will discuss with Jeff Wickman how 4-H prepares youth to make informed decisions about their careers and college path. All this and more next on Agriculture Today.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
You're listening to Agriculture Today, our Monday edition, and as always, thanks for tuning in. To get into the cattle market scene now, we will, of course, highlight the numbers from the USDA's semi-annual cattle inventory report released this past Friday afternoon, what those mean to the market and especially to that ever-present question over herd expansion or contraction across the U.S. We'll take that up and much more with Katelyn McCullock. Katelyn is the director of the Livestock Marketing Information Center based in Denver and sponsored by K-State, as well as numerous other land-grant universities. Well, before we look at our centerpiece here, that is the cattle inventory report, Katelyn, the cattle trade this past week, the cash market in the Central Plains actually backed off a bit.
Yeah, live cash cattle sold at about a $122 this week, which is $1 to $2 lower than the previous week. And we saw the same sort of trend on Kansas feeder cattle receipts as well, although I believe those were limited by some snowstorm activity in that area. Feeder cattle sold notably lower. 700 to 800 points were going for about 142, and 5 to 6 inch lower, closer to the 160s, down from about 170 last week. In the Southern Plains, all the weight categories fell, and anywhere from $3 to $10 a hundredweight lower. Any particular catalyst behind that slippage in the market? I think the market's looking at the futures market to some extent. Lean hogs had a very rough week last week. They had 3 limit down moves, all related to uncertainty over coronavirus, and I think some of that is spilling over into the cattle market as well. All these proteins in the U.S. have really been gearing up for potentially some large demand from overseas, and I think there's significant concern with this disease that could really hamper demand from China and possibly elsewhere as well. The numbers that we keep hearing out of China relative to coronavirus continue to climb. The CDC and other foreign health officials have increased screenings at major transportation depots around the world. I don't think they're quite calling it a pandemic yet, but that is the big concern, and that would have widespread impact not just in China, but probably in the global economy. And in that this coronavirus story is going to have legs for quite some time. This will not clear up in a matter of days or even weeks. This could have lingering effects on the markets in general, financial as well as commodity trades. That's a good point. The stock market, too, has been very reactive to this. I believe on Friday it was down over 500 points on the Dow, and it clearly shows that the world is looking to this as possibly the trigger for the next recession. Well, we're certainly hopeful from the health standpoint that this is dealt with and contained expediently, and the markets would benefit from that as well. The cattle inventory report. The industry has, as it typically does, eagerly awaited these new numbers for several months now. And you might go through the highlights if you would, Katelyn. Well, Eric, possibly no one more eager than me to see what this was showing. We've been tracking cattle slaughter, beef cow slaughter specifically, and heifer slaughter all year and watching those numbers continue to grow. And so to have some clarity has really been helpful. Most of the report was fairly in line with what pre-report expectations were. The total cattle inventory was down 0.4%. The beef cow herd posted a year-over-year decline of 1.2%, but I should note that NASS also revised down the 2019 number as well by 75,000 head. So we're looking at a smaller beef cow herd both last year and this year. Beef heifers held for replacement were down 2%, and that was probably the biggest divergence from what the pre-reports were suggesting. The pre-report estimates suggested replacement heifers for beef cows would probably be down closer to 3.5%. So quite a few more heifers held back for replacement than what the consensus was. That other heifer number, so that's those heifers that were placed into feedlots, increased 0.8%. That's a little bit less than probably what the pre-reports were showing. They were thinking it was up closer to 2%.
But again, the standout there would be that beef replacement heifer number, which declined again, but not to the degree the trade thought it would. What does that signify, do you think, Katelyn?
I think the implications are that we're in a contractionary phase, that we're definitely not expanding anymore. But on a typical cattle cycle, you would see fairly strong liquidation in the subsequent years. This report shows maybe more of a moderate, meandering decline in the overall beef cow herd over the next several years. That heifer number suggests that, there's still probably fairly high numbers of replacements out there. And so if we did get the demand from China or in the export market, this inventory level could turn around actually fairly quickly at this point.
Now, to note, the report also posts the calf crop number. It was down slightly as well, so no surprise to anybody in the trade, but that's noteworthy nonetheless.
Yeah, the 2018 calf crop was revised 90,000 head lower, and then the 2019 calf crop was revised from the July estimate to 36.1 million head, and that's 240,000 head lower than that July 1 estimate suggested. I think overall, on the beef side, it seems like this is fairly bullish for live cattle prices. A shorter calf crop in 18 and then also in 19 should boost calf prices throughout the rest of 2020. On the feeder cattle side, though, I think we're seeing some weakness related to uncertainty, but ultimately I think feed costs is going to determine how feedlots view those animals moving forward. We're expecting feedlots to post fairly strong returns in the first part of 2020, but after that, I think things are a little bit more up in the air than maybe they were even a month ago.
Said succinctly, though, Katelyn, the cattle inventory report in total doesn't seem to deter all that much from the generally positive tone about the markets that we've heard expressed so far in early 2020.
I would still say the report is fairly positive for the cattle industry moving forward. Some of these other factors that we've talked about still remain to be seen, but the underlying fundamental is that we're going to have less cattle available for slaughter and less calves moving forward for subsequent years, which should in turn boost live cattle prices. Very well.
One more thing we'd like to take up today, and you and your staff have actually posted a brief article on this on the lmic.info website. You've observed that the percent of cattle grading prime has continued on the upward trend, something that has spilled over from 2019.
Yes, we've seen, specifically starting in probably 2017, some more aggressive jumps in the percent of beef grading prime. Now, in 2017, about 6% of carcasses that were presented for grading graded prime, and that jumped to 7.95% in 2018. Now, when we moved to 2019, the average was 8.6, so maybe not quite as big of a jump as it was from 17 to 18, but still moving progressively higher. USDA AMS does break that out by region, and there are some differences there, but those numbers I just gave you were on a national basis. The other trend that we're seeing is that the percent grading choice has increased in volume as well, maybe not to quite the extent that prime has, but the bigger change is probably the amount of select graded beef has been declining. So about 9% of carcasses last year in 2019 graded select compared to a 5-year average of 12.25.
Those numbers in hand, what do you think they suggest then about the trends in beef production? Obviously, quality stipulations maybe trending higher anyway, but what do you think this truly signals about the market ahead?
I think there's a couple underlying things that are going on. Genetic improvement is continuing in our industry, and you can see that in the makeup of these cattle numbers. But the other thing is there seems to be more expressed interest from retailers to offer more prime cuts, particularly when you've seen the premium of prime versus select come down. Right now it appears to me that we've had a little bit bigger supply than maybe where the market is currently, and that's why we've seen that prime choice spread decrease over the last couple of years. But Costco specifically has offered a lot more prime beef in the last several years. And then Walmart has recently announced that they're opening a case-ready plant, so they're not actually slaughtering cattle there, but it's a fabrication plant. And they're going to focus on higher quality cuts of beef as well.
A changing complexion of the beef business, and another indicator of that in this escalation in prime-graded cattle. So, Katelyn, as we look ahead to the trading week before us, coming off of that cattle inventory report, how do you think the markets might respond this week? And once more with the fed cattle market slightly lower last week.
Unfortunately, I think this report is going to be overshadowed by global concern over coronavirus moving forward. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the cattle inventory report keep prices relatively steady. Now, even though the report was generally bullish, those impacts could be muted by some of this uncertainty. We could be looking at rather stable prices, but I wouldn't expect huge changes next week.
But as things unfurl in regard to the coronavirus, the markets will be reactive, it would seem, one way or the other, rather abruptly, perhaps.
I would agree with that.
Before we let you go, we'd remind folks, Katelyn, that they should check out that website we alluded to. That is lmic.info. And as always, we appreciate your time, and especially this time around, your analysis of that cattle inventory report. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
Katelyn McCullock with us, the director of the Livestock Marketing Information Center. And that's our cattle market segment for this week on Agriculture Today. Legal and financial concerns surround the day-to-day management of the agricultural industry. Producers, ag creditors, and USDA agencies rely on Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. If you've received an adverse decision from the USDA or have an ag credit concern, call today 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services, exploring options, generating solutions. Agriculture Today continues now. It's a big part of commercial cow herd genetics management, breed selection. And while you producers tend to stay with the breeds you've traditionally committed to, sometimes thinking beyond the routine can pay off. Giving us some things to think about along that line, K-State veterinarian Brad White and cow-calf specialist Bob Weaber. This is part of their conversation during the latest Cattle Chat podcast from the Beef Cattle Institute at K-State.
Today we're going to talk about herd composition and breeding plans. So this is a great time of year as you're sitting down, planning out not specifically what bull am I going to buy, but what type of bull am I going to buy or how am I going to manage that long term. We don't all have the same breeds of cattle, but there was a pretty cool study that Beef did, and they did a survey, and they asked producers about their herd composition. So what was the breed composition of their herd, or maybe more accurately, what type of cattle do they have in their herd?
Yeah, so Beef Magazine periodically does this survey of their readership to kind of gauge trends in the existing cow herd in terms of composition, but also kind of looking forward. They ask questions about both kind of what kind of data do you use to buy bulls, how do you anticipate that changing, what types of bulls do you anticipate buying over the next 3 to 5 years, and so forth. So kind of some really interesting stuff in that report.
So what's the predominant, if I'm a commercial cow-calf guy, what's the predominant type of cow that's out there?
Well, that's a great question, Brad. And in their data, not surprising, producers responded, about 55% of producers in the U.S. have what they typified as either straight British or high percentage British cows. What do you guess the next biggest category is?
British cross.
British crossbred cows would be number 2 at 17%. And then coming behind that is the British Continental hybrids or composites. So think Sim Angus, Balancer, Limflex, those kind of products. Then a straight or high percentage Continental, mixed Continental crossbreds at 3%. So it tapers. I mean, once you get out of the sort of what you would typically think as you went to maybe a sale barn and kind of watch cows go through it pretty well matches up that. High percentage Bos Indicus, about 1%. Combined Bos Indicus influence somewhere, just about 10% of the cows would have a segment of Bos Indicus blood in them.
So given that herd composition, about 2/3 of them British or British cross cows. They also ask a question there about what type of bulls people are thinking about buying.
Yeah, which I thought was really interesting. And these numbers, I got looking at the math, and I was struggling a little bit to make sense of it, but it's apparent that people could check multiple boxes because the total adds up to more than 100.
More than 100.
So recognize that these numbers represent, in some cases, people were buying 2 different kinds of bulls or more, so they could respond to multiple options here. But of the respondents, 58% of them said they were going to buy Angus bulls, about 20% Hereford bulls, 19% Red Angus. Sim Angus hybrids come in at 17%, Simmental 14%, Charolais 9%, Balancer at 7%, Brangus and Gelbvieh both at 5%. So I kind of rounded out that top 9 choices. So,
and you and I had this conversation, in fact, back in the spring of last year when I was asking you about buying bulls, and for cows that some of them they're all English cross, right? But some of them are Angus cross and some of them are Hereford cross, and trying to figure out what's the best type of bull to put in that scenario. And what we see people do, similar cow herd base, English cross, and they're going to English bulls.
Yeah, so there's
make sense?
Yeah, and if you kind of dig through the data a little bit, a couple of trends that stuck out to me. Obviously, if you go into the primary breed composition of kind of the high percentage or straight British cows, that's mostly Angus. About 3/4 of the cattle would be straight Angus, 15% Red Angus, about 9% Hereford. So if you kind of connect the dots between what the cows are and what people are buying,
they're Angus.
They're Angus, and they're buying Angus bulls. So, and maybe it was hard to decipher if there's a trend towards more or less crossbreeding, but it sort of highlights the question of, as we think about these kind of breeding decisions, how might we incorporate a structured crossbreeding system? Interestingly, though, as you go into the other groups as you look through the list of kind of the top choices of bulls, a fair number of bull consumers are buying, products like Limflex, Balancer, and Sim Angus, because those represent a pretty good portion of the projected bull market share, if you will.
So I'll make an argument that, and you've listed off several breeds of bulls that people are buying. I would make an argument that all of those are good given the situation, right? So for my operation, how do I make the decision? What type of bull do I want to buy?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Brad, and it really ties back to a whole series of questions we can ask producers. And I think in our business, the de facto position has been really to kind of straight breed because of the simplicity of that. Yeah. But over time, an evolution of products that are, the hybrid bulls that are just as easy to use as straight breds, but offer some heterosis, sort of help get at that. And so we can take a producer through a series of questions to kind of help guide what makes sense in terms of a breeding program.
Yeah. So where would you start that process?
Yeah, I think the process really starts with kind of understanding what it is that you have, right? The base cow herd, and if they're straight bred of one breed or another, then that points you in a certain direction. If they're already kind of a mixed up group, maybe we go another direction to sort of help sort out or move animals towards the middle in terms of breed composition amongst one or two breeds to kind of get that.
So a lot of us would say, I've got Angus cross cows, and then it probably merits a follow-up question in many situations, because Angus cross cows could mean I've got Angus cross cows and we've been breeding to Angus bulls and saving the heifers and been doing that for generations.
Yeah, they're 7/8 Angus, for example, right? Yep.
They're very much Angus, in which case I've lost some heterosis there.
Right.
So you got to understand the current breeds that I've got there.
Yep, and the range in breed types. So if you've got some, say that are, if we've been using maybe a back cross or top cross of Angus back on a set of cows, well, what percentage of them do we still have in the herd that might be F1s of another breed combination?
It could be.
So the range in breed composition is helpful to know as well.
So you said back cross or top cross. Define those.
Same thing, but using a bull to increase the breed fraction of that particular bull.
Gotcha.
So, yep.
So we also have to decide how we're going to market those calves, which may influence our breeding decisions.
Yeah, and I think that's a really key component too, because we know type and kind, coat color has market consequence in more or less depending on where you live. If you live in South Texas, it's not atypical to go to this marketing scenario with a set of calves that are part Brahman, for example. If you did that in North Dakota, those calves would look very different than what the buyers there are used to and likely incur some substantial discount. So making sure that the marketing perspective comes into the decision is really important.
And also, am I selling them? Am I feeding them out? Am I retaining ownership?
Yep.
Do I care about carcass traits? Because that influences some of my decisions. But on the flip side, I can't have it all, because what if I want the best carcass calf and then I'm saving females?
Yeah, so those are kind of juxtaposed in some cases. So yeah, sorting through that marketing scenario is a really important piece, because it sort of either frees you or constrains you into breeds or breeding systems that make the most sense.
And we talked about early on about different areas of the country. Same cow base in the southeastern part of the U.S. as we have here in the Great Plains, or as you look further west in more arid regions? Some differences there?
Yeah, so there's and that was one thing actually in the survey that we didn't get as much information on, which I thought would be really interesting, is to look at those differences in breed composition. But certainly as you think about breeding system design, that kind of breed adaptation to geographic region and environment is really a key component, so that we make sure, if we need bug and humidity and weather tolerance, that we incorporate breeds that are known for that. If we need to control lactation potential, we pick breeds that fit that. Yeah. So those environmental constraints play a really important role, as does the managerial piece. We can think about, Brad, in your case, you got a few cows.
Yeah.
Really complicated breeding system probably doesn't make a lot of sense.
It's not going to work.
Implementation's not. It's going to be really difficult. Yeah. If I've got thousands of cows, I'm not constrained by scale, and I can effectively use bulls efficiently of different breeds, more convenient.
But the key from this whole discussion for me is put thought into that breeding program and be able to capitalize on some of the heterosis that we have and the breed complementarity.
Yeah, for sure. And sort of the last piece of that sort of decision matrix really is the replacement heifer part. And the replacement heifer becomes the most economic advantage of crossbreeding comes from expression of maternal heterosis, about 2/3 of the economic value, which in today's calf prices, I estimate somewhere probably close to $100 a cow per year. So it's a huge number, and it's one that takes the most planning and strategic planning to make sure we capture. And I think producers, in the survey pointed out again, about 85% of producers keep their own replacement heifers. So this maternal heterosis decision is central to the discussion. But one of the things that may be the most effective thing to do is don't keep your own replacements.
Yeah.
Purchase F1 females, mate to a second or third breed bull to produce crossbred calves of high value, very convenient, easy to deploy system, but you have to buy those replacement heifers.
K-State's Bob Weaber and Brad White. And as always, you can hear the entire podcast at beefcattleinsitute.org. We'll return in a few moments on Agriculture Today.
When you are in need of timely, reliable, and trusted information, K-State Research and Extension is here. Whether it's organizing people, information, or resources, they have the necessary tools. Community comes first for K-State Research and Extension. For more information and to connect with your county's extension agents, visit www.ksre.k-state.edu.
This is Agriculture Today. I'm Jeff Wickman. One outcome of Kansas 4-H is that it helps prepare youth to make informed decisions about their careers and college path. Kansas 4-H collegiate specialist Shane Potter says that 4-H career and college readiness programs are helping youth develop important life skills. Shane, there's a lot of aspects to Kansas 4-H, and one of those deals with career and college readiness, getting the youth ready to go to college.
Yeah, this is one of our main outcomes within 4-H, is we're looking at how we're going to prepare youth for the future. And one way that we've quantified that is to look at preparing youth for the next step. And all of our programs really set that up as a way to explore their options, as well as dive deep in a safe place and try out new things.
Sometimes they don't know what all is available after high school.
Oh, exactly. And if you think back to when you were a youth, most of the time you know the things of the people around you. And really within our projects, so 4-H is a project-based learning opportunity. We have two ways that we seek out opportunities for youth to explore careers. So first, within their projects they're taking, let's say a youth is signed up for photography. They're learning about ways that they can apply those skills in a career and education after high school. They're also learning direct ways that they're exploring opportunities for mentorships and assistantships and ways that they're going to engage with their community. So we have two really main ways. Within their projects, they're looking at opportunities to apply those skills, and then we're looking at general exploration. So how can they find out what are their options? How can they grow as an individual and look at really taking advantage of the things that they're seeing and taking part in 4-H?
And this hands-on actually gives them the chance to experience it, to know how much they really like it. Sometimes things look great on paper, but when you get out there and you start doing it, you find out you're maybe not as interested or even more interested than you thought.
Exactly. And that's one thing within 4-H that we really strive for, is that we're looking at creating a safe opportunity for youth to try things out. So we have volunteers that are experts in the field, and we help those volunteers understand what youth development is and how they can share their expertise with the youth. But that all happens within that safe environment where youth are able to try things out. I always think of going up for a job interview or giving a presentation. That is really hard if you haven't prepared and had opportunities to try it out beforehand. So within the 4-H program, we try to provide those opportunities for youth to go out and try new things and have a safe opportunity to fail, because it is okay to fail and they need to try things out. But how can we do that so it's not earth-shattering? They're having opportunities where they learned something and then they can try it again. We're learning the concept of maybe it's not yet. Your first time out, you got a red ribbon, which is average in our program. So then how are you going to improve next time? And we have trained volunteers and judges that work with them to show them how they can improve and what they can do to get better.
They're also learning a lot of skills along the way as well?
Exactly, yes. We do focus on clear skills that they can use in the future and that will help them in their immediate lives. Things like, how do they engage with the people around them, their social skills? How do they have emotional regulation? So if things are hard, how do they move forward? How do they have clear coping skills to move past the emotion? We just had a speaker that talked about all emotions are mentionable, so that means they're all handleable, that we can help youth have the opportunity to look at how they deal with things. We have a lot of emotionally charged events that happen in our lives. So having opportunities to practice and look at how are you going to cope with those emotions in a healthy way is one of the things we look at in 4-H. We work with our volunteers and our staff on the same thing. How could we be good role models and demonstrate the things that we say are important to our youth?
Self-discipline is another skill that they're learning?
Yes, we really focus on that responsibility. Within the discipline, we often talk about grit. In our projects and the way that we have things arranged, we want youth to not give up. So they have grit and determination to move forward. And that's one of those things that we've seen really relates to how they will be successful in their future. Have they had opportunities where things were hard, but they didn't give up? So when they get to college or when they go to a tech school or whatever happens in their next stage, if things are hard, they have that endurance and that grit to move forward. And that's because they've practiced and had opportunities to succeed in a program like 4-H.
Self-motivation also kind of along that same line?
Exactly, yep. Within 4-H, we look at that. How do they have the ability to make their own decisions? youth and adult partnerships is a key cornerstone, but it's how can we support them? So we're giving the opportunity for youth to look and make decisions that can guide them forward. So it's not that we're telling people what to do and we're making decisions for them, but giving them an opportunity to succeed and teaching them how to make good choices. One of our mechanisms we use to do that is project-based learning. And that's something that project-based and problem-based learning is something you'll see in the school systems throughout. And that's something we've done in 4-H for over 100 years. It's how can you find a goal and figure out what are the steps and things you need to do to get towards that goal. And that really is the basis of how we're doing learning and helping youth succeed.
The other thing is responsibility. That kind of follows right along with that.
Exactly. An example within our projects, we have some great animal science and animal husbandry projects. That ability and opportunity to care for something that's living that needs you is a great opportunity to gain those responsibility skills. You are tied to the care and well-being of another living thing. And those skills really do carry through in the rest of their lives and what they're doing. I used to do the horse project, and we had great opportunities through years of training and development with that animal that you're working with. And those are the opportunities we really like to grow within the program.
4-H is also working closely with Kansas State University to give 4-H youth a chance to experience life on campus.
Exactly. And as part of what we're trying to accomplish is that opportunity to explore and experience what it will be like to go and be part of an educational system. So if you have a spark and a passion in an area, let's say you really love animal science or engineering, or if you love the fine arts and you want to dive into photography and journalism, we want to give youth that opportunity to explore that career. Good or bad, if you are young and have that opportunity to say, this is something I think I'm interested in, to go and take part and learn from faculty and engage in that subject matter really gives you that chance to find out, is this what I want to do with the rest of my life? Do I have a spark and a passion in that area? And that's the other part of 4-H, that we're really looking at how can we help youth explore that spark. So when they come to K-State, they are ready and they're engaged and they know what drives them and what they want to do in their future. For example, we do Kansas 4-H Discovery Days, where youth come to campus, they're engaged with faculty, they're learning in-depth content, they're having that experience of what college life is like. So when they come to campus, it's not foreign. They have an ability to scaffold, I know this is not a scary thing and I can do it. And we give them that opportunity that there's familiarity with the process and what campus is like and what it would be like to go on to post-secondary education. We want all youth to do some type of training and go on and learn as much as they can. So how can we help them find that best fit? And what is that spark that's going to move them forward? And we have 4-H Discovery Days on May 27th through the 29th. And that's an opportunity to come to campus, look at different areas and find out, what do you like? What would you like to do in your future?
That's Kansas 4-H Collegiate Specialist Shane Potter. To learn more about 4-H, visit kansas4h.org. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. Along with Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.